Today on Co-op for Two, a quick spoiler-free review of Guilty Case 1, Houston 2015. Is this new small box deduction game for you? Let's find out. You can currently pick up Guilty Houston 2015 from Amazon for $19, but really the regular price at a board game store, and it's available online at plenty of board game stores, is about $13, which puts it at the bottom range for this kind of game. It's a one-time playthrough, but easy to pass along. Nothing gets damaged, really. It does make very minimal use of the internet. It's basically an offline experience, except that you're told you're free to use the internet while playing, and there is some research that will benefit you from doing online medical research, etc. So probably you will want to have an internet available for this, but most of your play will be offline just with the components in the box. You can watch a full playthrough of the game on YouTube that we did that took us about 10 hours, but it won't take you 10 hours to play. Probably, though, you should expect 3 to 4 hours. Again, on the top end of length for this kind of small box mystery game. And unusually, it is rated for 18 plus because of mature content. So how does it play? Well, essentially you read an introduction and then you'll spend all of your gameplay choosing which cards to reveal and read. And then at the very end, you'll answer a series of questions to test whether you've solved the mystery. This is a deduction game, not a puzzle-based game. And it is essentially a solo experience. You can play it with a group, but you're all basically just collaborating and discussing. There's no separate turns, etc. Let's open it up and take a look at what you get in the box. Now, this is going to be spoiler-free, so I'm just going to show you stuff you would see immediately. You've got this, essentially what acts as a board, but it's just a spatial layout to help you organize the cards. It doesn't serve any real purpose. There are no clues here. It's just to help you organize your work surface. But you can see the art is beautiful. Then we've got a rule book here. It says spoiler alert, but it's just reminding you not to read the other stuff in the box. So the rules are very simple. It tells you to lay out stuff, and you've just basically got a couple things to remember. What symbol means, take a card from a deck or put a card back into a deck, and when you have to obey the rules to flip cards right away. You will be keeping track of time. I'll talk about that in a second. And here's your little 2-page introduction to the case, which just tells you the story and then has you grab a bunch of cards to start on the table. There's 2 decks of cards here. There's your main story cards, and then there's a very clever mechanic here, a time deck. Now I'm just going to show you basically what this looks like. So this is the deck that ticks down time as you go through. So this is essentially your clock. When you get to the end of it, you'll have to answer questions, and then there are some special events that you will be instructed to shuffle into the event deck as you play. That means certain events are timed and come out. You get a little bit of foreshadowing that they're going to come, and then they trigger. On the back of these cards, many of them are blank, but occasionally you'll turn over a time card that tells you to do something, that adds a little bit of story, a little bit of narrative, or in fact tells you to bring out a new card that changes things dramatically. Now, the story cards, these big oversized cards, are all generously illustrated on the back, and frequently these, well, you'll be told to bring out a whole set of them, 24 of them in the beginning, and just lay them out. Those will be your cards available to read. So you start out this game with a big set of options, and each turn is just picking which card to flip over and read. And I'm going to just show you, I'm going to scan through quickly some of the back so you get some idea of the density of the information, but don't pay attention to the details. Just take a look at the kinds of density of information you get. Sometimes it's pictures, sometimes it's a whole bunch of text, sometimes it's a diagram. It's really quite a generous and dense collection of cards in a mystery, more so than most games that are similar. And there is one extra little component here, an envelope with a single sheet in it that you'll be told to get out and read when the time comes. The game that came to mind most while we were playing through this was Suspects. If you played that, there are 3 boxes of Suspects, each with 3 cases, so 9 full cases in Suspects, and a case of Guilty is like one of those 9 and priced about at the same price point per case. It's similar in terms of being a serious deduction case, so it has a similar vibe, and I think if you like Suspects, you're going to like Guilty and vice versa. However, there are some interesting differences. This is a longer case than a classic case of Suspects. The cards are more dense with details. Sometimes it even feels like you're playing a cold case game where you've got a full autopsy or something on the back of a card. It's got a different vibe in terms of how many cards come out on the table in the beginning. You've got a lot more choices, a lot more different directions you could attack a case. It's got this whole time deck, which is new, which really does make the case feel more alive. Time is ticking by, you can see it, you can sense it, and events trigger. And an event may trigger to take away cards from you, add new cards. You really do feel like you're in a dynamic world, and it does add quite a bit of tension. Now, there are things missing here in Suspects that Suspects does quite well. Suspects has cards that you can line up and combine to see if something matches, fingerprints match, or see if something was used by someone or ask someone about some other person or thing. None of that here. There's also a difference in philosophy in terms of seeing all the information. In Suspects, you're given some questions in the beginning, so you know what you're trying to answer, and then you try to answer it at different points, and eventually you see all the cards. The key part of Guilty is that you will not see all the cards. You are given a strict time limit. You don't know the questions ahead of time. And you try to be efficient about what cards to look at because you will not have time to look at all the cards. Furthermore, some cards may be taken away from you. Something happens, changes the scenario. A person that you were able to interview at one point, you couldn't. So you're always thinking about, like, do we need to do this first before it goes away, before it's too late? And here, you don't know what questions you're supposed to answer. In fact, the beginning of the game tells you, take notes, this is difficult case. And you better understand everything because you don't know what you're going to get asked at the end. And the end questions are, it's not just like 1 or 2 questions as it is in Suspects. Here you're asked a whole bunch of different things. So in some sense, very similar to Suspects. In other senses, it's got its own different twist on things. Final thoughts. Our group really did enjoy Guilty. It's a serious game that requires real attention to detail. It's longer than most of these card-based mystery games that we play. I mean, longer than most Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases as well. It's a serious case. And that's matched by the maturity rating, 18 plus. It's an odd choice. It's not something that you see often in games, and our group really appreciated that. Mostly the 18 plus is for a little bit of graphic detail. It's not like it's a more realistic case. There's plenty of cartoonish stuff happening here, and it's not like there's real gore or adult language. It's just sort of playing it safe by restricting it to 18 plus, but something welcome from my group. I'll come back to that in a second. I do think if you like Suspects, you should try Guilty and vice versa. The actual case I would rank as medium to high. Lots of room for debate if you're playing with a group. I mean, the thing that we like most about these games is debating and chewing on theories throughout the case. And if you embrace that kind of thing, I think there's lots of debate and fun to be had here, theorizing about cases. One of the highlights here is the narrative element. There's narrative in the beginning introduction. There's narrative on every card. Lots of it is talking to people. Even the ending is told in a narrative that unfolds. It's very well done. But then really the kicker here is this event time deck, which basically has narrative flowing throughout it. So every turn you take, you're turning over a little extra bit of narrative story, snippets of text, and events are happening. And that really does create a completely different feel. It feels like you're in the middle of an investigation and you're hearing about the investigation as you're trying to solve it, and things are happening. And that time ticking by, knowing you can't see everything, really does create a whole different sense of tension that you don't get in something like Suspects. It's done very well. The writing is very good. It works. Now, there is a bit of a problem in that the flip side of that coin creates a bit of a problem. And it's my one real worry here, which is that you don't see all of the cards. And that makes it more difficult for a designer to ensure you see all the necessary cards to solve a case. And when you add into that the fact that this is a hard case, I think you really do run the risk. And I think it's not just theoretical, it is here with this case. You run the risk of a group finishing this case having not seen the cards they need to truly solve it completely. That's a danger. I think that will be happening to groups. I think there will be groups that play through this, take it seriously, and because of the choices they make, do not see, and not to their own, not a fault of theirs, just when you choose what cards to see, you really can't strongly predict what cards are going to have some important information. And when we played through this, we did solve it. But we took a look at it. We took a look at, would it be possible, how hard would it be to finish this case having not seen critical cards that would let you solve the entire case? And our conclusion was it would absolutely be possible. So I do worry a little bit that that's going to happen to groups. I guess my recommendation, someone asked for some advice. My recommendation would be play according to the rules. Stop your case when you run out of time. But when you get to the questions, if you feel like you're not confident in the answer, allow yourself to go back and read more cards. Give yourself a sort of informal overtime where you're allowed to read the cards that you otherwise wouldn't be because of time. And then I guess another slight criticism here would be maybe a little bit too much in terms of philosophy of designing a mystery. It felt like maybe a little too much leaning on creating lots of red herrings. Like it almost felt like most of this case was creating evidence and documents and clues for red herrings and just a few tiny little bit of clues for the main mystery. And it works to some degree. It does throw you off the trail, but in the end, when you solve the case, it might feel a little underwhelming that there wasn't that much evidence towards your main case. And then the last thing we should say is this is part of a series, a guilty series, and I expect there will be a bunch more cases, and I hope there is. We definitely enjoyed this one and would play more. But you should know that some of the unique elements of this case, of Houston 2015, the mature 18 rating and the focus on a difficult, hard case, looks like it's not going to carry over to the next case. The next case is Monaco something, and it looks like it's rated for a normal group of 12 or 14 and up. and I understand it's going to be an easier case. So here's hoping that they return to the harder, mature cases eventually.